So we're going to talk about how blood flow is controlled with this lecture. And we've got two objectives. And so we're going to have intrinsic, extrinsic, and local control. Okay, so I want you to focus on this picture. And for right now, just worry about the bottom part. Okay, so at rest, cardiac output's normally about 5 liters a minute. Okay, and notice where blood flow is distributed. 20% goes to our kidneys, 15% goes to our brain, 20% goes to active muscle, 25% goes to the digestive system. And then obviously we've got some other places where, skin and blood or bone, that sort of thing. Okay, but notice what happens when we begin to exercise. Okay, those values change. Now we've increased blood flow by 5 times during heavy max exercise. Okay, but if you look, we've really reduced how much of that cardiac output goes to various locations. Okay, the only place where blood flow remains relatively constant is in our brain, right? We need a specific amount of blood to get to our brain, and so we try and maintain that. Okay, other than that, everywhere else reduces, and then we have a huge increase right here with our skeletal muscle. And this is because the amount of blood we need is determined by what's going on in the tissue. More blood flow or more oxygen demand, greater blood flow. Okay, more metabolically active, more blood flow. And so we can distribute or redistribute blood flow, and we can also increase our cardiac output. So this leads to our intrinsic and extrinsic control. Now remember, intrinsic, we're talking about changes come from within. Okay, so now we're talking about the tissues, the blood vessels. Okay, so we're altering blood flow due to the changes in the tissue. Now, when we have increased metabolic activity, this causes vasodilation, okay? So think about in terms of we'll have low oxygen, high CO2, among other things. Then we've also got, so like I said, so we could classify this as metabolic regulation. So if I've got high CO2 or hydrogen ion or lactate, not lactic acid, or low oxygen, metabolic regulation will help increase blood flow to the tissues. We've got endothelial regulation, okay, and what we mean by that is there's substances that are released by the blood vessels themselves that will cause changes in their diameter and allow more or less blood flow. And then we've got myogenic regulation. Now, we mentioned this a few weeks ago in class, and we talked about it in the physiology class about how blood flow to the kidney can be altered due to myogenic regulation. So if I've got low pressure going to my kidneys, those vessels will dilate to increase blood flow. Whereas if I have high pressure to my kidney or somewhere else, they'll constrict to reduce blood flow. Then we've got extrinsic control. So these are changes that are coming outside of the cardiovascular system, okay? And so this is neural control. Sympathetic nervous system causes vasoconstriction via epinephrine, okay? With the exception of coronary blood vessels, epinephrine actually causes them to dilate because if you're having a fight or flight response, your heart is going to need more oxygen. And so we dilate those coronary blood vessels to activate or to let more blood flow into them so that the heart can work harder. Okay. Generally speaking, we have a high level of sympathetic activity, but if we increase that level of sympathetic activity, that's going to cause a reduced blood flow because we're causing vasoconstriction. Okay, and we're talking about specific regions here. So think about exercise for a second. So you have this fight or flight response. You release a lot of epinephrine, which is going to cause vasoconstriction everywhere. Is that what you want? And the answer is no. Okay, you're going to want it to like your digestive system, and you're going to want to reduce blood flow to your kidneys and to your skin, depending on how hot it is, but you're not going to want to reduce it to where the active muscle is. And because the muscles contract during exercise, they need extra oxygen so they can generate ATP so you can keep doing what it is you're doing. And so we have a large need for exercise. So even though this exercise stimulates a sympathetic response, remember that causes vasoconstriction. But the muscles will overcome this vasoconstriction, and you actually have vasodilation in the muscles, which will allow for increased blood flow to them. And we're going to talk more about this a little later on.